It was a sunny Thursday morning in Los Angeles when Joel Osteen received the unexpected email. You've been invited to appear on the Kelly Clarkson Show. Topic: Faith in Modern America. At first glance, it looked like a standard media booking, but something about the wording, something in the way faith was emphasized, made him pause. His team was skeptical. "It's Kelly," one of his associates said, tapping the email header. "She's usually all smiles and sunshine, but she's been leaning into tough conversations lately. This could be a trap to challenge your message." Joel leaned back in his chair in his Houston office. A framed quote about hope and resilience hung on the wall. On his desk lay his well-worn Bible, its cover softened from years of study. "Let her try," Joel said calmly. "If she wants to question my faith, I'll bring truth to the conversation." By the time his flight landed at LAX, social media was already buzzing. Skeptics teased, "Why is Kelly inviting the prosperity pastor?" Devoted followers warned, "Don't fall for the ambush." But Joel wasn't flustered. He had been underestimated before. Backstage at the Universal Studios lot, a stylist asked if he wanted to soften his look. Joel declined politely. "I'm not here to blend in," he said, slipping on his understated silver crosspin and smoothing out his impeccably tailored suit jacket. He didn't need flashy makeup or wardrobe changes. Just clarity, conviction, and a calm spirit. Meanwhile, Kelly stood off stage reviewing her note cards. "Let's make this interesting," she told her producer, raising an eyebrow. "A little tension gets the views up." The curtain lifted. Cheers erupted. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pastor Joel Osteen." Kelly's voice was warm, but the applause felt divided. Some cheers, a few murmurs. Joel stepped into the spotlight, his signature smile steady, back straight. Kelly greeted him with that famous grin, but her eyes, Joel noticed, were measuring. "Joel," Kelly began after some small talk, "you are known for your message of hope and positivity, reaching millions. Don't you ever think maybe you're just giving people what they want to hear?" The audience laughed nervously. Joel didn't. "Actually, Kelly," he replied, his voice calm but clear, "I've been sharing a message of God's love and potential since I was a young man, and it's not about applause, it's about conviction." A flicker crossed Kelly's face. It had begun. The moment Joel delivered his calm, cutting reply, the temperature in the studio shifted. Kelly's trademark smile twitched just enough to register annoyance. The audience laughed again, this time with uncertainty, as if unsure which way the show was tilting. "Touchy," Kelly said, adjusting her seat, "but let's be real. When you preach a message that's always upbeat, doesn't it come with a lot of baggage? Like, are you really connecting with people's struggles?" Joel's expression didn't change. He leaned forward, his posture unshaken. "If you're referring to a message that has inspired millions to overcome adversity, find purpose, and build stronger communities, then yes, I carry that message proudly." A few claps rose from the faith-leaning side of the audience. Kelly chuckled, but it was sharper now with less warmth. "Oh, come on," she said, her tone suddenly laced with mockery. "You don't really believe all of that, do you? Or are you just trying to be the next viral motivational speaker?" It was a classic celebrity host move. Wrap the jab in a joke and let the crowd laugh at the punchline. But Joel didn't laugh. Instead, he simply looked at her, his eyes steady. "Here's something interesting, Kelly," he said, his voice even. "According to your own lyrics, you sing about believing in something bigger, about finding strength through faith. What changed? Was it the facts or the pressure to be critical?" The studio let out a collective gasp. Kelly blinked. She clearly wasn't expecting such a direct personal callback. Joel leaned in just a bit more. "You question people like me for standing by our beliefs. But what really bothers you is that we don't back down, even when we're outnumbered on shows like this." Kelly tried to brush it off. "You're passionate, I'll give you that. But passion without practicality is just noise." Joel tilted his head. "And practicality without spiritual truth? That's just fleeting trends." That one hit. The audience stirred, this time with murmurs. A few heads nodded, a few brows furrowed. From the control room, a producer whispered into Kelly's earpiece, "He's flipping the room, move on." But Kelly wasn't ready to move on. "Oh, I've got more," she said with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's talk about the prosperity gospel, shall we? You claim to inspire people, but some say you just preach wealth. How do you sleep at night?" Gasps, applause, a few cheers. Joel didn't flinch. "I sleep just fine," he said slowly. Because I don't reduce faith to a financial transaction. I believe in God's abundance in all areas of life. Joy, peace, health, not just material gain. It was no longer a lighthearted interview. This was a battleground, and Joel had just planted his flag. Kelly tapped her note cards lightly, a practice move to hide unease. The audience didn't react quite the way she expected. Normally, when she called someone out, especially a figure like Joel, the crowd would erupt in easy laughter. But now there was tension. Joel sat with perfect composure, hands folded in his lap, his silver crosspin gleaming subtly under the lights. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to smirk. He let his words do the heavy lifting. "You see, Kelly," Joel said, voice steady as stone, "people don't tune in to watch a spiritual ambush disguised as entertainment. They tune in for truth, even if it challenges them." The words landed. Even some of the crew backstage exchanged glances. Kelly let out a forced chuckle. "You're a tough one, I'll give you that. But truth is complicated, and I'm not sure you see the whole picture." Joel responded without missing a beat. "Maybe not, but I see enough to know that faith, hope, and love for humanity aren't punchlines. And yet, every time someone on your side talks about unity, they forget to include people like me." That line drew unexpected applause. Sharp, real, and scattered across the room like lightning. The sound made Kelly hesitate just long enough for Joel to press forward. "You say I don't understand struggle," he continued. "I grew up in a humble ministry, watched my father build this church from scratch. I've worked, prayed, faced criticism, and stood up again. What I didn't do was inherit a talk show, millions of dollars, and a platform to mock people for their spiritual values." Boom! The audience let out a mixed reaction, some impressed, some shocked. Kelly's trademark smile finally slipped. For a moment, she looked swole behind her massive stage desk. "You think I mock people?" she asked. "Quiet now." Joel didn't flinch. "I think you use laughter to avoid deeper conversations, but not today." Kelly leaned back in her chair, the card in her hand trembling just slightly. And that's when it happened. From backstage, a voice called out loud enough to pierce the silence. "He's not wrong." Heads turned. Even Kelly turned. It was a young crew member, probably in his 20s, stepping to the edge of the set. "I grew up with this message, and he's saying things I wish someone had said about faith years ago." Gasps, real ones. Joel didn't turn to look. He didn't need to. The momentum was shifting, not just in the room, but in the narrative. Kelly straightened up, blinking fast. "Let's take a break," she said to the camera. The lights dimmed, but no one felt like laughing. As the stage lights dimmed and the commercial music played in the background, the studio transformed. The crowd buzzed with nervous murmurs. Some applauded under their breath. Others stared at Joel with newfound curiosity. Kelly, meanwhile, sat frozen for a second longer than usual, long enough for her producers to notice. Backstage, a senior producer rushed to her side. "We need to pivot," he whispered. "Social media is already reacting. Hashtags are popping up. Hashtag Joel claps back is trending." Kelly waved him off with a tight-lipped nod. "I've got this," she whispered back. Meanwhile, Joel sat silently at his guest chair. He didn't scroll his phone. He didn't talk to anyone. He simply looked at the set, at the cameras, at the audience, at the blue and pink toned lights, and then he slowly adjusted his crosspin, almost like a shield being fastened before battle. His associate, Mark, approached from the wings. "You're trending. Wanna see?" Joel shook his head gently. "Later, let's finish what we came here for." The break ended. Cameras rolled again. Kelly returned with a grin, but this one lacked teeth. "Welcome back, everyone. Things got a little intense before the break. Let's cool things down, shall we?" She turned to Joel, who was already facing her. "I didn't bring you here to fight. I brought you here to understand." Joel didn't blink. "Then maybe next time start with an open heart, not a challenge." "Oof," the crowd murmured again. Kelly shifted gears. "Let's talk about joy for a moment. You're a man of faith. Surely there's something you and I can agree on, right?" Joel leaned back just a bit, gaze steady. "Or no, that Americans are desperate for authenticity and tired of shows pretending to have it." Boom! Kelly's smile cracked for real this time, but she wasn't ready to give up. "You know, Joel," she said, fingers tapping the armrest, "you're very confident for someone who preaches such a simple message. And you're very dismissive," Joel replied. "For someone who claims to uplift people." The crowd gasped again. For the first time, the Kelly Clarkson Show didn't feel like a sanctuary of clapping and laughter. It felt like a reckoning. Kelly laughed nervously. "Well, this has taken quite the turn." Joel nodded calmly. "It usually does when spiritual truth walks in." And with that, the audience, young, old, secular, devout, broke into thunderous, divided applause. Some stood, some sat stiffly, but everyone was fully, undeniably awake. Kelly's usual control over the room, over energy, tone, and laughter was slipping fast. She tried to smile through it, but the rhythm was off. The audience, once her orchestra, was playing its own tune now. Joel didn't exploit it. He simply let the silence linger. Then he leaned in, his voice lower, more deliberate. "You know, Kelly, I didn't come here to argue. I came here because you invited me. But from the moment I sat down, I was treated like a problem, not a guest." Kelly blinked, caught off guard by the measured tone. Joel continued, "You say you want unity. You say you want dialogue, but you invited me here and expected me to apologize for what I believe before we even had a real conversation." The room quieted again. You could hear someone cough in the upper left row. No music, no laughter, just quiet. Joel's words weren't shouted, they were anchored. "You mocked my spiritual views. You questioned my sincerity. You called my ministry a performance, and now that I pushed back, I'm being called aggressive." He shook his head. "That's not a conversation. That's a test." Boom. The studio, now fully silent, held its collective breath, and then someone clapped. One, then three, then a wave. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to rattle Kelly. The host laughed awkwardly. "You've rehearsed this well." Joel looked directly at her. "No, I've lived it." Another clap, then a voice from the crowd, deep and clear. "Let him talk." Kelly shot a glance at her producer, but she knew it was too late to steer this. Joel leaned back slightly, eyes scanning the room. "I preach a message you might not understand. That's fine, but I love my country. I believe in its people, and I don't need Hollywood's approval to know what's real." He turned back to Kelly, expression softening just slightly. "You don't have to agree with me, but if this show is truly about kindness, then maybe start by showing a little." It wasn't a line meant for applause, but it got one. Loud, real, lasting. Kelly's face was still, her jaw slightly clenched. She'd faced tough interviews before, but none like this, because for the first time, it wasn't a celebrity or a politician across from her. It was a pastor with steel in his spine and no interest in playing nice. And the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were listening. Kelly adjusted in her chair, the light sheen of sweat now visible along her temple. Subtle, but real. She wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not on her own turf. The applause still lingered in the corners of the studio like smoke after a fire. She tried to clear it with humor. "You know, Joel," she said, her voice just a bit sharper, "I've had on world leaders, artists, activists, but I've never had someone come on my show to lecture me." Joel raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe it was overdue." That hit hard. Kelly leaned forward now, voice tightening. "You act like you're some kind of spiritual guru, but let's be honest, you're a televangelist. You preach positive affirmations. You motivate. You inspire. That's what your job is." Joel's face didn't change, but his voice did. It dropped a half octave, calm, cold. "You just described exactly what you're doing right now." The audience gasped. Kelly tried to laugh, but it caught in her throat. "Oh, come on," and Joel didn't blink. "You're spinning because this isn't going how you expected, and instead of adjusting, you're attacking." Kelly opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Joel continued, "I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to be honest. If that's threatening, maybe the problem isn't me." That line stuck to the walls of the studio like glue. Then, in a moment that changed everything, Kelly fired back with something too sharp, too personal. "Maybe if you stopped hiding behind that little cross of yours, people would take you seriously." The audience recoiled. Even the producers looked stunned. Joel's hand slowly went to his cross pin. He didn't touch it. He just let it be seen. Then he stood calmly, quietly. The room froze. He looked at Kelly, not with anger, but with deep disappointment. "This," he said, "is what some in media really think of people of faith like me." He turned slightly toward the audience. "You mock what I wear. You mock what I believe. And then you pretend you're about kindness." Dead silence. Kelly was visibly shaken. Joel didn't raise his voice. He didn't storm off. He just said one thing. "You just told the world who you really are." And with that, he sat back down. A full 10 seconds of silence followed. Not a single clap, not a single word. Kelly had crossed a line. And Joel, he had just turned the entire studio into a sanctuary and let America be the judge. The silence after Joel's last words was thick, like fog on a cold battlefield. It wasn't a dramatic silence. It was an uncomfortable one, an exposing one, the kind that makes people shift in their seats and question everything they just saw. Kelly tried to break it. She looked at the camera and gave a weak smile. Well, that got serious fast, but the audience didn't laugh. Joel didn't look at her. He looked straight into the camera, not with rage, not with defiance, but with calm, unwavering certainty. Millions of Americans wear a cross, he said, voice low. Millions pray quietly before work. Millions stand for their values and bow their heads in grief when loved ones pass. He paused, letting the words settle. If those things make us a punchline in your world, then maybe the joke's not on us. That line hit like a freight train. Twitter exploded in real time. Within minutes, Kelly mocked faith and Joel claps back were trending nationwide. The control room panicked. Producers scrambled. Kelly's assistant flashed a note in bold letters. We're losing the audience hard. Back on the stage, Kelly shifted in her seat, her voice shaky now. Joel, I didn't mean it that way. I was just trying to lighten the mood. Joel finally turned to her again, expression soft but firm. You can't hide behind entertainment when it becomes disrespect. The crowd started to shift. First, a middle-aged woman in the second row stood and applauded. Then a college student in the back. Then more. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough to break the illusion that Kelly had control. One audience member even shouted, "Let him speak." Kelly looked visibly rattled. Her posture stiffened. She picked up her note cards, but her hands trembled slightly. She flipped to the next segment, hit back again, then finally said, "We're gonna cut to commercial." The lights dimmed, the cameras stopped, but in the control room, the damage had already been done. On TikTok, clips were flying. Joel's quiet, "You just told the world who you really are," overlaid with captions like, "The moment Kelly lost the room." Christian broadcasting producers were already calling Joel's team, and across social media, a new image was being formed, not of a soft-spoken televangelist, but of a man who stood his ground without shouting, who stood for millions by standing tall in silence. Joel wasn't just a guest anymore. He was the story. The Kelly Clarkson Show's commercial break ended, but the energy never recovered. Kelly returned to camera with a strained smile. "Welcome back. Things got a little passionate today. Let's move on." But America wasn't moving on. By the time the show aired on the West Coast, clips from the East Coast taping had already racked up 3 million views online. Fox News aired a full segment titled "Kelly versus Faith, Did She Go Too Far?" and TikTok. It was a battlefield. One viral video showed Joel quietly adjusting his crosspin, then delivering his now iconic line, "You just told the world who you really are." The video captioned, "That wasn't a clapback, it was a cultural moment." Hit over 7 million views by midnight. Faith-based influencers hailed Joel as the unshakable voice of modern spirituality. Even moderate secularists admitted on social media, "I don't agree with everything he preaches, but Kelly crossed a line." Backstage, Joel sat quietly with his associate Mark. His phone buzzed nonstop. News alerts, booking requests, DMs from pastors, teachers, even former skeptics, thanking him for standing up. A message popped up from a contact saved as "Friend in Ministry." "You were brilliant. They needed to see that. God bless." Joel didn't respond. He just turned to Mark and said, "We're not done. Book me on Good Morning America, the Today Show, and wherever else they'll let me share a message of hope. Let's take this national." Across the country, reactions poured in. At a diner in Des Moines, a waitress pointed at the TV and said, "That man just stood taller than most men I've seen on that stage." At a university in Chicago, a professor rewound the video 3 times, whispering, "He never even raised his voice." In countless homes, people of faith felt seen and affirmed. Meanwhile, Kelly's team went into crisis mode. A written apology was drafted, but never posted. Her PR manager advised silence. "Let the news cycle move on," they said, but it didn't. The hashtag Crossgate began trending by morning. A poll from a major outlet asked, "Do you believe Kelly disrespected faith on live TV?" 68% said yes. Joel wasn't a side character in someone else's narrative anymore. He was a central figure in a national moment, and he was just getting started. 3 days after the interview aired, Kelly canceled her next taping. The official word was production scheduling, but the media didn't buy it. Headlines filled the feeds. Kelly faces fallout after faith clash. Joel Osteen goes viral for calm rebuke. Is daytime TV losing touch with America? Joel, on the other hand, was everywhere. He appeared on Good Morning America, sharing his message with poise. On the Today Show, he sat opposite a skeptical anchor and delivered every answer with clarity and conviction. He didn't gloat, He didn't spike the football, he just kept showing up. And America kept listening. At a small-town church in Georgia, the pastor used his quote in Sunday sermon, "You can't hide behind entertainment when it becomes disrespect." At a national faith conference in Buses, his speech was moved to the keynote slot. The crowd of 10,000 chanted his name before he even took the stage. Even in places he never expected support, it came. A well-known entertainment journalist tweeted, "I often question the motives of televangelists, but that was one of the most disciplined, powerful media moments I've seen from any public figure." He didn't yell, he didn't play victim, he owned it. Meanwhile, Kelly's producers began receiving emails from longtime viewers saying they were deeply disappointed by her remarks. Sponsors began asking questions. In her gated home, Kelly sat with her head in her hands, watching the clip for the 12th time. She didn't recognize herself in the footage. It wasn't the joke that undid her. It was the moment Joel didn't flinch. The quiet, the weight of being on the wrong side of the line. Across the screen, Joel had looked unshaken. On her own set, Kelly had looked petty. Back in Houston, Joel sat with his ministry team. His advisor placed a folder on the table. Late-night offers, morning shows, podcast invites. "You're hot right now." Joel just smiled. Not because I said something flashy, but because I stayed still when it mattered. His team nodded. This wasn't just a media victory. It was a repositioning. He wasn't just a pastor from Houston anymore. He was something bigger, something unshakable. That moment on the Kelly Clarkson Show didn't just go viral. It reframed who held the mic in American culture. And for once, it wasn't the host, it was the guest. 1 week after the interview, Joel stood on stage at the National Faith Leaders Summit in Dallas. The crowd of nearly 20,000 people rose to their feet before he said a single word. And he didn't smile. Not yet. Because he knew this wasn't about applause anymore. It was about truth. "Some said I went too far," he began, his voice steady. "Others said I didn't go far enough." The room fell completely silent. "But I didn't show up on Kelly's stage to win a fight. I showed up to remind America that your faith, your values, your identity don't belong to late-night punchlines." Applause erupted, but he held up his hand, calming them. "That moment wasn't about me. It was about all of you. Teachers who can't pray out loud. Veterans mocked for their patriotism. Small-town moms told their beliefs are outdated. I didn't defend a pin. I defended a principle." His words landed like thunder. Clips hit X within minutes. Fox News ran his full speech live. CNN hosted a panel just to discuss its tone, message, and why it worked. Even The View cautiously acknowledged, "He's shaping the conversation whether we like it or not." And Kelly, she stayed silent. A written apology was finally released. Vague and too late. Damage already done. Behind the scenes, Joel's office received over 15,000 letters in 5 days, many handwritten from strangers across the country, thanking him for speaking without screaming, for standing when others stayed silent. One note read, "I'm 76, felt my faith was constantly ridiculed. You gave me hope again." That letter hung on Joel's office wall, just beside a frame holding a screen grab of him from that day on Kelly's stage. Crosspin visible, eyes calm, shoulders back, a symbol not of outrage, but of strength. By the end of the month, several national faith organizations had launched new campaigns for religious tolerance and expression, citing Joel's moment as inspiration. He had become more than a guest on a talk show. He was a movement. And as he left the summit stage, his team asked, "Should we call this a win?" He paused, looking at the cameras now trained on him like they had been that day. "No," he said with a soft smile. "Call it a beginning. Some moments don't just happen on television. Some words aren't just spoken. They echo through hearts, cut through silence, and awaken the conscience of a nation." That day, Joel Osteen didn't just defend himself on Kelly's stage. He stood for millions whose faith, values, and identity had been questioned. He didn't stay silent. He stood firm. And with that, he stirred something deeper. This is a story where confidence raised its voice, faith stood its ground, and truth finally thundered through. But what about you? Would you dare to speak up when the world expects you to stay quiet? If this story moved you, subscribe, and don't miss the next episode of Surprising Stories. Because in a world that still hides countless untold truths, we'll be here to uncover them one story at a time. Surprising Stories. This is where real defiance begins.